There is a lake in Montana so toxic that geese landing on it die within hours. A lake 1 mile wide and over 500 feet deep, filled with water the colour of rust. The pH is extremely acidic, enough to dissolve metal, and it is growing. Every day, millions of gallons of contaminated groundwater flow into what might be the most toxic body of water in North America. This is the Berkeley Pit, and it exists because we dug so deep looking for copper that we accidentally created a poison lake that will never go away. For decades, mining companies pulled billions of dollars in copper from the earth beneath Butte, Montana. They carved out one of the largest open pit mines in the world. Then in 1982, they turned off the pumps and walked away. The pit immediately began filling with toxic groundwater. Today, it holds over 50 billion gallons of acidic, metal-laden water, and every year it gets deeper. This is the story of how we created a permanent toxic lake in the middle of Montana, and why we might never be able to fix it. Butte, Montana used to be called the richest hill on earth. Starting in the 1880s, copper mining turned this remote mountain town into one of the wealthiest cities in America. Copper was everywhere, in electrical wires, in telephone lines, in the infrastructure of the Industrial Revolution, and Butte had more copper than almost anywhere else on the planet. At its peak, Butte had a population of over 100,000 people. Massive mining operations ran 24 hours a day. Shafts went thousands of feet underground. The city became famous for producing the copper that electrified America. Fortunes were made, empires were built, and nobody was thinking about what would happen when the mines closed. By the 1950s, underground mining became too expensive. The copper deposits near the surface had been exhausted. The deeper you go, the more it costs to extract ore. So the mining companies made a decision. Instead of digging tunnels, they would remove the entire mountain. In 1955, the Berkeley Pit opened. It was an open pit mine, meaning they used explosives to blast away rock and haul it out with massive trucks. Every day, they would detonate tons of explosives, carve away another layer of earth, and extract the copper-bearing ore. The pit grew larger every year, wider, deeper, more destructive. For nearly 3 decades, the Berkeley Pit operated non-stop. At its peak, it was over 1 mile across and 1,500 feet deep. That is deeper than the Empire State Building is tall. The operation required constant pumping to keep groundwater out. Massive pumps ran continuously, removing millions of gallons of water every day to keep the pit dry enough to mine. But in 1982, the Atlantic Richfield Company, known as ARCO, shut down the Berkeley Pit. The price of copper had collapsed. The mine was no longer profitable, and when they closed it, they made a decision that would define Butte's future forever. They turned off the pumps. Without the pumps running, groundwater immediately began flowing into the pit. The Berkeley Pit sits in a natural bowl surrounded by thousands of abandoned underground mine shafts. For over a century, those mines have been pumped dry. The moment the Berkeley Pit pumps stopped, all that water had somewhere to go, down into the pit. And this was not clean water. As groundwater flows through abandoned mines, it dissolves heavy metals: copper, arsenic, cadmium, zinc, sulfuric acid. The water becomes incredibly toxic, and all of it drains into the Berkeley Pit. Within months, the pit started filling. A lake began forming at the bottom, and it has been growing ever since. Today, the Berkeley Pit contains over 50 billion gallons of contaminated water. The lake is over 900 feet deep, and it rises about 6 inches per month during wet years. The water is unlike anything you have seen. It is a deep rust red colour, from dissolved iron. The pH is extremely acidic, more acidic than vinegar. If you put your hand in it, your skin would start burning. The water contains lethal concentrations of heavy metals: arsenic, cadmium, zinc, copper, sulfuric acid. It is essentially a giant vat of industrial poison sitting in the middle of And the most disturbing part? It is still growing. Every day, Millions of gallons of contaminated groundwater flow into the pit. There is no outlet. The water has nowhere to go except up. Eventually, the pit will fill to a level where it starts contaminating the surrounding aquifer. That level is called the critical water level, and we are getting closer to it every year. In 1995, something happened that showed just how deadly the Berkeley pit really is. A flock of migrating snow geese landed on the water. At the time, around 342 geese stopped to rest on what looked like a large lake. Within hours, they started dying. By the next morning, over 340 geese were dead. Their insides had been chemically burned by the toxic water. The incident made national news. It forced people to realise that the Berkeley pit was not just an environmental problem, it was an active threat to wildlife. Since then, the pit has been monitored constantly. Whenever birds are spotted heading toward the water, workers use sirens, pyrotechnics, and drones to scare them away. It is a daily battle to keep wildlife from landing on a lake that will kill them. But scaring away birds does not solve the bigger problem. The water keeps rising, and if it reaches the critical level, it will contaminate Butte's groundwater supply. That would be catastrophic. Tens of thousands of people rely on that aquifer for drinking water. If the pit water mixes with it, entire communities could lose access to clean water. So what is being done? The short answer is not enough. In 1994, the Berkeley pit was declared a Superfund site, meaning the federal government recognised it as one of the most contaminated places in America. Cleanup efforts began, but the scale of the problem is staggering. The main strategy is water treatment. A treatment plant was built to pump water out of the pit, remove some of the heavy metals, and discharge it into a nearby creek. But the plant can only process a fraction of the water flowing in. The pit is still rising. The treatment slows it down, but it does not stop it. There have been other ideas. Some scientists proposed adding lime to neutralise the acidity. Others suggested filling the pit with clean water to dilute the contamination. But every solution is either too expensive, too slow, or simply does not work at the scale needed. The reality is that the Berkeley pit might be unfixable. And here is the uncomfortable truth. This was not an accident. The mining companies knew that turning off the pumps would flood the pit. They knew the water would be toxic, but they did it anyway. Because keeping the pumps running after mining stopped would cost money. It was cheaper to walk away and let the pit fill than to deal with the consequences. For years, the companies argued they were not responsible. They claimed the contamination came from natural geology, not mining. It took decades of legal battles before they agreed to pay for cleanup. And even then, the funding is not enough. The federal government and the state of Montana are stuck managing a toxic lake that will exist for centuries. The Berkeley pit is also a glimpse into the future. As mines around the world close, many of them will face the same problem. Open pit mines fill with toxic water. Abandoned underground mines collapse and contaminate aquifers. The metals we extract come with environmental costs that last far longer than the economic benefits. And Butte is not alone. There are contaminated mine sites across Montana, Nevada, Arizona, and other mining states. Some are smaller, some are less toxic, but the pattern is the same. Mining companies profit for decades, then leave when the ore runs out. The cleanup costs fall on taxpayers, and the environmental damage lasts forever. Butte itself is a strange place now. The city that once had 100,000 people now has around 35,000. The mines that built the town are gone. What remains is a toxic pit, a struggling economy, and a community trying to figure out what comes next. But Butte also has a fierce pride. The people who live there are not giving up. They are fighting for cleanup funding. They are demanding accountability from the companies that profited from the mines. And they are trying to build a future that is not defined by the toxic legacy left behind. There is also something darkly ironic about the Berkeley pit. It has become a tourist attraction. Thousands of people visit every year to look at the toxic lake. There is a viewing platform where you can stand and stare at the rust-coloured water. It is beautiful in a disturbing way, a reminder of what happens when we prioritise short-term profit over long-term consequences. The Berkeley pit will never be cleaned up, not fully. The water will always be there. The contamination will always exist. The best we can hope for is management, treating enough water to keep it below the critical level, monitoring wildlife to prevent mass die-offs, spending millions of dollars every year to contain a problem that should never have been created in the first place. And the lesson is clear. Environmental damage from industrial activity does not disappear when the industry leaves. The mines closed 40 years ago, but the Berkeley pit is still here, still growing, still toxic, and it will be here for centuries. We created the Berkeley pit by digging too deep and walking away. We turned off the pumps and let it fill with poison. And now we are stuck managing a permanent toxic lake in the middle of Montana, a lake that kills birds, a lake that threatens drinking water, a lake that will never go away. The Berkeley pit is what happens when we prioritise extraction over everything else. When we assume someone else will deal with the mess. When we treat the environment as something we can use and discard. And the terrifying part is that there are hundreds of sites like this across America. Abandoned mines, contaminated water, toxic legacies that will outlast all of us. The question is not whether we can fix the Berkeley pit. We probably cannot. The question is whether we will learn from it before we create the next one. If you want more videos like this exposing environmental disasters, hit subscribe, drop a comment. Did you know about the Berkeley pit? See you in the next one.